Okay, Monopon really does not want me to sleep this week, it seems. It started out nice and simple. There were a couple new aspects shown off, but the primary things being talked about were additional information in bios for the same 6 main characters who got detailed descriptions 2 months ago. So I was thinking, okay, finally I can get a break. They're ramping down in preparation for a new trailer coming out soon, because this is the season where E3 would have been. There's obviously going to be a direct. And then they dropped what seems to only be part 1 of the big battle system explanation blowout. So yeah, I normally start recording the audio for these videos on Saturday morning, because if I do that, I'll know as a fact that all the Japanese information for the week is going to be done and out publicly by then. I'm starting this Thursday night, because if I don't think the video will ever be out in time before more information comes out and just makes it impossible for me to ever be caught up. So if I contradict something I say earlier in the video, later in the video, that's probably why I don't even have the luxury of doing this in one recording session anymore. With that said, spoilers for Xenoblade 1, 2, Torna, and Future Connected, as always with these analyses. You might want to check out all of my previous videos, but you can probably watch this one without needing to see any of that, just because I try to make things relatively self-contained. Since I'm recording this before all the week's information is out, I can't tell you exactly how many sections this video is going to be, although I do know as a fact I will be talking about 4 tweets, 1 set of images that came out a month ago and people just never really paid attention to until now, then the entire blog post, and then at the very end of the video, so there's probably going to be more tweet explanations in between the blog post and this, there will be a small spoiler section, as some of the images and footage that came out this week show more gameplay details that are not explicitly evident in anything the developers outright say, and might hint at potential future plot elements. So to be safe, for those of you who want to go in a bit less fully informed than everyone who's watching the entirety of all these massive analyses, I'm going to cordon that off into its own section at the end of the video, so just watch for me to say spoiler warning again when I get to that point. Without revealing any of the content in that section here, I will say that in addition to a bunch of small inaccuracies that have been piling up over the weeks, some of the stuff in the spoiler section is sufficient to completely debunk the 4chan leak of Xenoblade 3 that was given out about a month and a half ago by an alleged playtester who said they got 2 hours with the game and was able to see a bunch of story cutscenes they weren't supposed to, and then also learn a lot about the gameplay. There were a lot of fishy aspects of that entire leak to begin with, but there are now some outright contradictions that prove the entire thing was false, and just someone who happened to make a bunch of good predictions. I will say, they did get a lot of things right just by reasonable guessing based on pre-release material and the trailers, so really, if they wanted attention instead of making a fake leak, they should have just made massive analysis videos on YouTube. Worked for me, after all. The leak being false is great news, because that just means there's even more stuff we know as a fact that we don't know yet, which is always great, especially when we are still this close to release and know almost nothing. I know that might sound like a bad thing, but it's good for a game as big as a Xenoblade game, so that's great. And then also, a lot of the character details being talked about in that leak were not great and made it seem like Uni was going to be very bad and there was going to be another forced pointless love triangle. So I am a-okay with all of this stuff. Without further ado though, let's get into the actual talking about the information we did get and did get confirmations about, because we're going to be here for a while. The first tweet talks about Riku's Gem Crafting. This makes sense as we already got an explanation on Manana's cooking last week. At the breakpoint, Riku will gem craft you by picking it up during your adventure or using items obtained from enemies. Gem is a powerful equipment that can be attached to each character, and it has the effect of increasing the attack power and recovery power, which makes the battle advantageous, so make a lot. This should not be surprising from anyone who'd been following a bunch of the information from the past week. We had the Xenoblade 2 mechanic, crafting, and specifically the Pyra mechanic of cooking food return in the form of Manana, and we now have the Xenoblade 1 crafting mechanic, which is gem crafting, return in the form of Riku. The first image provided with this tweet shows Riku and Taiyon standing in front of a portable ether furnace. This is actually a device invented during the story, or technically during a side quest, of Xenoblade 1 that allowed you to do gem crafting on the go. This was sort of altered in X and 2, where in X there was only one place where you could craft augments, and in 2, you had to go to certain NPCs in various towns in order to craft ox cores. The 2 expansions, since they were shorter, cut down on the bloat by just dropping the completed versions, and it looks like they're going for a bit of a medium here in Xenoblade 3, where you do have to go to a specific location in order to craft gems, but that location can be basically any rest point in the game, so it's not nearly as restrictive as you have to go to a town. Couple things about this image. First off, yeah, of course there are going to be gems and not ox cores, because even the people who seem to be blades don't work like blades did in Xenoblade 2, so they were going to use the Xenoblade 1 version of character augmentations. That just makes sense. Also, again, Riku, Kev's character, he would know about gems and not ox cores. But why are they still using the same tabletop portable ether furnace from Xenoblade 1? Poppy had an ether furnace inside of her in Xenoblade 2, and it was like the size of a core crystal. So even people from the other nation, as in not the Xenoblade 2 one that would have ready access to artificial blade technology, should have at least been able to take some notes for that and do further miniaturization. So either Keves is really stuck in the past on certain aspects of its technology, or the actual big vessel part is a necessary part of the crafting process in order to further refine the crafting materials or something, and it's not just the engine as a power source. Also, Taiyon is here, and we can finally see his camp outfit without the class-specific jacket. However, he is such a cool dude that he is wearing a turtleneck underneath his turtleneck, so we still cannot see his chest to tell if there is a core crystal there or not, which is the only reason I, although that is a very different case for most other people, wanted to see him without the jacket on. Thanks, Taiyon. The fact that it isn't just explicitly showing whether or not he has a crystal there, though, leads me to believe that whether or not he has one is going to be some big important plot element and have to do with his character growth or opening up to other members of the party, so I still would not be surprised whatsoever if he had a core crystal. I'm guessing the whole plot twist is going to be the classic Xenoblade 2 plot twist of, haha, this person's actually a blade, and not, haha, this person isn't actually a blade, though it would be a neat subversion if it actually were the latter. The second image is super exciting because it shows more menu screens, this time being the gem crafting one, and yeah, I lied before, this isn't Xenoblade 1 gem crafting, this is Xenoblade X Augment Crafting, because Xenoblade 3 is actually Xenoblade X 2. There's a lot to unpack in this one screenshot, and the most surprising thing is probably the fact that it looks like there are only going to be 20 unique types of gems in the entire game. They're split into 4 categories of 5, the first 3 of which seem to be about a specific role, so tank, DPS, healer. My guess would be you do not need to necessarily be that role in your main class in order to equip such a gem, but the properties of those gems in each category will lend to better performing the specific role they're associated with. The 4th category is denoted by a star, which is a symbol we have not seen at all in this game previously, so my guess would be that they are either a neutral type of gem, which means they can be equipped on any type of class, that is, assuming the other 3 categories are in fact role locked, an out-of-combat type gem, so that would be things like Quick Step or Treasure Sensor, that does not directly affect your in-battle performance, or gems that can only be applied to your hero party members. Just because there are only 20 gem effects does not mean that the levels of gems do not return. As you can see, the player is highlighting the top gem in the DPS category and has it set to level 3. It looks like once you mouse over a specific type of gem, you can then use the L and R buttons to select which level of the gem you want to create. I'm guessing that passing either some story or side quest threshold will lock you out from crafting certain levels of gem, as while there's not really any harm in seeing the effect of a higher level gem, there is potential item spoilers in the materials actually needed to craft certain higher level ones because they will by necessity come from later areas in the game. So I wouldn't be surprised if you only get levels 1 to 3 or so from the beginning, and then after some big story point happens, you can get 4 and 5, and then need to do another quest near the endgame in order to get level 6. Going over all of the Japanese text, the upper left-hand corner just says Gemcraft. The thing on top of the list of gems says Zantetsu 3, which is the name of the gem being selected, and the text on the bottom says, the effect will increase by creating. There is a little up arrow next to the Zantetsu gem slot, so it looks like some sort of bonus of either the campsite or the characters involved in this crafting means that you will get a better Zantetsu gem for trying to create one. On the right hand side, the plus button icon says recipe check, so it looks like you could press plus to toggle between the recipe for a specific gem and something else, probably something related to your party list. Underneath that, we again have Zentetsu 3, and below that is the effect of the gem, which is add 30 to attack power. This type of gem is the first one in the list of DPS ones, so the fact that it is just a flat-out attack stat increase should not be a surprise. My guess would then be, of course, that the top one on the tank list is going to be either defense or HP up, and the top one on the healer list is going to be ether up. Underneath that is text saying number in possession 0, which just indicates that the player does not own any of these gems, and as we can see, they are also incapable of crafting it using materials, so there's a chance they might not own any even after this screenshot. Below that is the materials list, and we can see that Xenoblade 2 style material rarity of 1, 2, or 3 diamonds has in fact returned. The materials required are Gemstone, of which the player has 49, so that appears to just be a regular overworld collectible. Ansel's Graceful Wing, which is the only 2-star collectible in this list and is probably an enemy drop. Then Igna's Weapon, which is the only material the player does not have. Ardun's Weapon, which is probably supposed to be Ardun's Horn, and there's a wacky translation there. And Fossil of Jaguar, which is probably going to be translated as something a bit more fantasy-esque, and is probably the only other item in the list other than the gemstone at the top to be an overworld collectible. There is a gap, but it also shows that 1 ether cylinder is needed, and that the player has 31 in their possession. If you look on the top right, there is an ether cylinder symbol, so it looks like they are bringing back ether cylinders from Xenoblade 1 Gem Crafting, but in sort of a different role, where instead of using it to provide stats to your crafting, it's just a required component of performing one of the recipes. Underneath all of that, though, is required coins, and then a symbol of 8 gold Napon coins. Next to the ether cylinder list, we can see that the player has 27 gold and 63 silver Napon coins, and the button prompts underneath the recipe have A button, craft using materials, which is grayed out because the player does not have the Igna weapon material, but Y button says craft using coins. So it looks like you can obtain these Napon coins from some unknown source and use them to bypass material requirements for crafting if you don't have enough and want to avoid having to farm for things. So, assuming the coins are relatively easy to get, this is just another really nice quality of life thing in this game, which, as I have said in every video now, seems to be what they're going for. They acknowledge that they've had quality of life issues in the past in the series, and are doing all they can to make 3 a much smoother experience. Granted, we have yet to see how side quests work, so they could easily throw it all out the window at that, but I have hope. Next up is a video clip. The talent art of Mio's class Zephyr is Gemini Strike. It is also a powerful technique to collect the enemy's aim while avoiding the enemy's attack. If you use this technique, you can attract the attention of the enemy at once and protect your friends. This is just Mio showing off her double Destructo disc thing that we saw in the second trailer, so there's nothing super special here, but the fact that they go out of their way to specify that Mio's talent art has evasion on it all but confirms that not all talent arts are going to, despite the fact that using one puts you in a little cinematic, like Xenoblade 2 level 4 specials or blade combo finishers or chain attacks, that do give you invincibility frames. So, once again, this makes me question, why have the cinematics in the first place? They do not grant you invincibility. From what we can tell, there are no QuickTime events to do anything to improve your gameplay. Again, being able to turn them off for accessibility reasons is a good change, but not having them at all means you are just wasting time every time someone wants to do a talent art, and I was already able to math out that an optimal Noah player, before even factoring cross-class arts into consideration, will get 1 talent art every 20 seconds, and that's not also taking into account the fact that the player can switch around to multiple characters. So I'm really hoping that there is either some point to these cinematic scenes, or they can be turned off, because I don't want to be spending most of my time fighting in this game just watching the same talent art animations over and over. Other than that, we can hear even more of what I'm still going to say is the elite monster theme until we have reason to believe otherwise. The next 4 tweets came in pairs, 1 pair of Noah ones and 1 pair of Mio ones. The first one in each set was talking about how each character's class functioned, and since the blog post describes the classes of all 6 main characters, and includes the exact information from the 2 Noah and Mio tweets, I'm assuming we're going to get ones for the other 4 characters later on, So I'm just going to skip those two in tweet form and talk about the same information when we get to it in the blog post. The other two have actual interesting character information though. The video clip for Noah is an extended version of the shot of him playing his flute that was shown at the very beginning of the initial reveal trailer. The text machine translates from Google Translate as, "Noah is a mourning soldier who died on the battlefield. It is very sympathetic from the experience of having lived, and although there is a danger that even an enemy will sympathize, it seems that he is trusted as a reliable leader by his colleagues." This is not a good translation. Plugging in the exact text into DeepL instead shows, "Noah is a mourner for soldiers who lost their lives on the battlefield. He is highly empathetic due to the experience he has gained from the lives he has taken, and even though he is in danger of becoming sympathetic even to his enemies, he seems to be trusted by his friends as a reliable leader." Yes, the default translation anyone seeing that tweet initially would jump to says, Noah himself has died, and I have made jokes about Noah actually being dead all along because that was true for Shulk and Rex, but that is not what it's saying. It's just saying that he does the job of an Offseer because he is an Offseer. Other than that, the text just gives a little bit more insight into his personality, which is useful because despite him being the main character, we didn't get nearly as much of a read on him as we could with, well, everyone else except for Mio. Honestly, the two protagonists of this game are the ones I'm least invested in so far, so that's kind of weird. Google Translate for the Mio clip was also kind of janky, so I'm going to just skip straight to DeepL for it. Mio is Agnes's Offseer. She has a serious and kind personality, and perhaps because she is 1 year older than the other members, everyone seems to rely on her. Her hobby is keeping a diary, and she seems to have a very fastidious personality. Unfortunately, the entire thing about Mio and Noah having the least personality out of anyone in the main cast still holds, because despite the 22-second video clip of a cutscene, the most personality in any of it is Uni's one-sentence reaction shot rather than the entire monologue Mio is giving. This scene appears to be one that I have talked about several times, which is the Keves and Agnes parties talking to each other and getting to know each other after the fight with the Wild Ride monster. So that is after Van Damme told them to come together and find the real enemy, but before actually setting out on their journey. They're all still wearing their Keves and Agnes military uniforms, so it seems like they spent the night camping together and getting to know each other a bit before formally setting out on an adventure. When Mio introduces herself, she says that she is an Offseer from Colony Gamma, which is a new Agnes colony we're only now hearing about for the first time, so we have Lambda, Delta, and Gamma now, which also now means that we know more Agnes colonies than Keves ones, as for Keves we only know of colonies 4 and 9. This also, of course, means that there is likely some sort of commander for Colony Gamma, and it's also interesting because this is the closest to the beginning of the Greek alphabet we've heard from an Agnes colony before, as Delta comes after Gamma, and, well, Lambda is the 11th letter in the alphabet. I'm, of course, still thinking that the two nations are going to have capitals outside of any of the colonies. The capital of Keves is obviously going to be Alchemoth, and I have no idea what they're doing for Agnes. Maybe Gormod or Moradane? Don't really know there. But the fact that the 11th Greek letter has an Agnes colony suggests that at least at some point, Keves colonies went all the way up to number 11 as well, and we're finally going to get the number of a colony past Colony 9, which is interesting because it's sort of implied that Colony 9 was the highest number out of all the Homs colonies in Xenoblade 1. Of course, everything besides 6 had been destroyed, but it was sort of implied that 9 was actually the last one, and all of the destroyed ones were just 1 through 5, 7, and 8, and not anything 10 or higher. After introducing herself as the Colony Gamma Offseer, she says that she's confident about her speed, and that she can run 100 meters in about 7 seconds. For reference, Usain Bolt's world record is a bit over 9.5 seconds. Mio is so superhuman, she can run at 30 miles an hour. Okay. Then Uni does her funny reaction shot that's already become a meme, and Mio also says that her hobby is diary keeping and she never misses a day. So we already saw her writing in a diary and potentially crossing out the amount of days she has left to live in a trailer. This, again, tells us more about how funny Uni's snark is going to be than Mio's actual personality, and the only real information about her is world building and funny animal facts. Not to be too hard on her, but her being this fast is only impressive if you look from a human point of view, since she is far from the fastest cat. She can run at 30 miles an hour, cheetahs can hit 80. it's not actually that impressive. I'm sorry, Mio. Now it's time for some information for April that basically no one talked about because I don't think anyone knew it existed until a couple days ago, so thank you to Reddit user Spooky Portal for pointing this out because I, and I think most other people, would not have known about this otherwise. It turns out that in late April, Nintendo Everything posted an article about some of the information that had come out at that point, including a set of 10 screenshots, some of which I don't think can be found anywhere else on the internet. Most of these are very uninteresting, and some of them are just differently cropped versions of pieces of official art, but there are a few I think are worth talking about. There are a lot with the party in the late 20s in terms of level, and Valdi in the hero slot. This is a character that we have only seen in the trailer, so it's interesting that they're getting a little bit more love in screenshots. There are 3 screenshots I would like to talk about specifically. The first one has the player controlling Taiyon, and we can see some of his arts. Keep in mind, Taiyon uses a traditional type of Japanese charm as his weapon, so a lot of his art names are loaded with kanji, which means the machine translator really doesn't like them, so get ready for some funny. On the X button, we have something that is alternatively translated as have the same or wrap up, depending on what the machine translation feels like saying, which is an AoE sleep ability. On the Y button is Heavenly Wind, which is an AoE heal ability and is probably just his equivalent to Yuni's group heal. And on the B button, he has Magic Shadow, which is a field ability that has an evasiveness up buff for party members who stand in it. His talent art is 500 Heavenly Waves, which has a description that really likes changing because sometimes it just says total attack recovery, or overall ranged attack, or normal total recovery of attack. And one time it started talking about South Korea, so I'm not exactly sure what this is about. It seems like it's either full heal on the party for any damage they suffer during the attack animation. It might just be a pure full heal for the entire party, in which case it probably will take a very long time to charge up. Or it could be some sort of shielding ability. It's really hard to tell. I'm guessing Taiyon is going to be a bit more support and mitigation focused than Yuni is, just based on how his class is Tactician and hers actually has Medic in the title. So I'm not entirely sure what this does, but it does something. Yippee. I guess the other interesting thing is all 4 of his abilities here are AoE in some regard, so that's the first thing of those we've seen. In another screenshot, the player is controlling lands, and we can see some of his arts that we have not before either. His talent art, which I'm starting with for reasons you'll see soon, is Mad Taunt, which is an AoE provocation ability, so it's sort of like the boosted version of Mad Taunt that you could do in Xenoblade 1, where you draw aggro from every enemy in range instead of just your target. It's just Mad Taunt in Xenoblade 3, not a lot to talk about. On the B button is Upper Slash, which is a high aggro move. On the Y button is Crash Out, which we've seen plenty of times before, which is an AoE high aggro move. And then the biggest disappointment of this entire week's worth of news is his X button art, Heavy Charge, which is a topple art. We have the guy who is literally Rhine too. We can see some of his arts. His main class is heavily based on Rhine. His talent art is Mad Taunt, which functions a lot like Mad Taunt did in Xenoblade 1. He has a topple art. That topple art is not called Wild Down. You had literally one job, game. I can't possibly express how disappointed I am right now. Alright, I lied. There are actually 4 screenshots of import because I just noticed this Senna one, which has a couple of her arts that we have not seen before. I'm going to be brief about her talent art. It is called Pressure Drop and inflicts a launch on the enemy. This is the first launch art we've actually seen, which debunks my potential theory that only Ouroboros forms would have access to launch and smash, and the regular base classes of unfused characters would just be break, topple, and daze. So it instead looks like my other theory is true, where the Keves classes will get daze and the Agnes classes will get launch and presumably smash. It also is a little weird that we have launch on someone's talent art while we have seen regular arts on Keves classes with daze, so it might be that launch is more powerful, but it is harder to access because it's on things with longer effective cooldowns. The good thing is there's actually a video clip provided in the blog post of her using this ability, so I don't have to stay on a still image for a long period of time while I'm talking about different arts. So that's neat. I also love the animation. She turns her hammer into a barbell and then deadlifts it after hitting the enemy with it, which is just amazing on many levels. Her other arts in this picture are ones we've seen before. She has a big impact, a front positional oof on X, Hammerhead a side positional on Y, and Giant Swing a knockback on B. The fourth screenshot is the one that I actually came to this article for, as this is the only one where you can actually see Valdi particularly well. The player is controlling Uni here, but she is not interesting whatsoever, as all the arts visible are ones we've seen on her before, but what does matter is Valdi being clearly visible. They're still wearing the same pack they had on in the trailer, and their weapon is now very clearly shown to be some sort of gun, potentially powered by the pack they're wearing. This is very funny because Valdi is a healer class. This is a hero class, which means the party is likely going to gain access to it and use certain arts from it. This also means that we now have 3 confirmed healer classes. We have Valdi, weapon, gun, Uni, weapon, gun but slightly longer, and then Taiyon, weapon, paper. So that is 3 healer classes, 0 traditional healer weapons, which is good. I love to see Xeno games subvert JRPG tropes, which it does very frequently just by being better than most other JRPGs, but it's always good to see it do something kind of funny like this. Alright. As my good friend Ryan Xenoblade would say, time for pain. But the pain is me, because we're only getting to the massive blog post 26 minutes into the video. This blog post is basically entirely dedicated to arts, which sounds like it's a very specific topic, but they are doing a lot of things with arts in this game, so it actually does warrant an entire explanation to itself. And yeah, we still don't know everything about the combat. They do not explain chain attacks here, they do not explain Ouroboros here, and we still haven't seen any in-combat switching, so that's why I'm saying this is only blog post 1 dedicated to just the basics, mind you, of the battle system, and I'm guessing that unless we get a trailer that explains certain things before it, blog post number 5 is going to cover the things I just listed here. Starting out, the first section is what is a technique, parentheses, arts. Arts are techniques that a character can use during battle. When the battle begins, the characters make an automatic attack called auto attack, but the arts are more powerful than that auto attack. Arts are assigned to each of the 3 buttons, B, X, and Y, and can be used with the push of a button. Once you use the arts, you cannot use them for a while until the gauge is full, so it's important to use the arts in a timely and effective manner. Each character has a variety of specialties, such as a profession called a class, and each class has its own unique arts. Noah's class, Sword Fighter. Sword Fighter is an attacker who is good at attacking the side and back of the enemy. Sword Fighter's arts, Sword Strike, can destroy enemies when attacking from the side. Also, Thrust Edge is an art that can do a lot of damage when attacking from the back. Mio's class, Zephyr. Zephyr is a defender who protects his friends by concentrating the enemy's attacks on himself while dodging the enemy's attacks with quick movements. Zephyr's art, Butterfly Edge, is a technique to focus the enemy's aim on yourself. It goes well with Air Fang, which increases attack damage when the enemy is aiming at you, so be sure to attract the enemy before using Air Fang. Mercifully, the first 2 segments of this article are very simple because they're just blogifications of a couple tweets we've had in the past talking about Noah and Mio's classes. Nothing really interesting to talk about here, even the video clips are reused. Okay, now it can get big. By the way, thank you for being so nonchalant about that, article writer. There are 5 arts in each class, and you can choose 3 of them to set, so it is important to choose the arts that match the characteristics of the enemy. Not only that, but we also now get to see the 5 arts that go with Noah's Sword Fighter class. His set arts are Air Slash on X, Sword Strike on Y, and Thrust Edge on B, with his talent art of Overclock Buster. All of that stuff we've seen before. In the arts list, however, are Ground Beat, which is an AoE art of his that I do believe we've seen before, Sword Strike, Thrust Edge, and Air Slash, and then the bottom art, which is the one that's selected, one we have not seen before, a returning Shadow Eye. The panel on the right-hand side says Arts Details, and explains what Shadow Eye is about in this game. It first says rank 15. This initially, of course, makes you think, oh, level 15. The art has been leveled up 14 times, and it's now level 15. But I kind of doubt that, because the max art level in X and 2 was 5, and even in DE it was only 12, so upping it to 15 seems a little questionable. What I think is the case is that, yes, you can level up your arts using some sort of art currency, probably AP or something of the like. That's not what's being shown here. Rank 15 is the class rank within Sword Fighter that you need to be in order to unlock the ability to use Shadow Eye. I think this basically just because rank was the term Xenoblade X used to denote your level in a class and separate it from your character's level, and since this game is a Xenoblade X sequel wearing Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2 hats, I feel like they're going to use as much X terminology as they can fit in there, so this is mostly just intuition, but I think that is the case. Anyway, the type of the art is buff, the target is self, and the power multiplier is 0%. I believe power multiplier is just the Xenoblade 3 Japanese term for what's known as damage ratio in Xenoblade 2, and since Shadow Eye is a purely buffing art, it of course has a 0 damage ratio because it doesn't do damage at all. Its recovery time is listed as 35 seconds, which, yeah, that's an oof, especially compared to all of the Agnes arts, which will recharge from auto attacks and seem to recharge faster than a lot of the circle arts. However, it is worth noting that this is at least faster than even a level 12 Shadow Eye would be in any version of Xenoblade 1, so sure, whatever. I'm still not happy about circle arts, but it's faster than 1 at least, and battle switching might mitigate it. Anyway, the buff/debuff is attack up, and the reaction is cutting the user's aggro in half, so this Shadow Eye is sure made out of Shadow Eye. I mean, it's a Xenoblade 3 art from Xenoblade 1 on a character from Keves that works almost identically to how it does in Xenoblade 1. I don't really think there's a lot more that can be said about this. But we could also see Noah's stats, which are in order: HP, attack, recovery strength, dexterity, speed, crit rate, guard rate, defense, and ether defense. This is just Xenoblade 2 stats again, pretty much, but the only interesting thing is recovery rate instead of ether attack, so it might be if you're on a physical class, you'll only have a recovery rate stat, but that will morph into ether exclusively or something later on. I'm not entirely sure. It could be that there is no ether attack, but that would be weird since ether defense is still a thing and ether abilities are clearly a thing. Not entirely sure about how that works, but at least agility is still 2 stats for accuracy and evasion, which means the one thing in the series that even Monolith realized was too broken, that being Xenoblade 1 agility, is still not returning, so that's good at least. Not really much else to say here, though. I guess the only other oddity here is the fact that it states the buff given by Shadow Eye, but it does not state the buff duration, which is kind of interesting, because the game was very upfront about Shadow Eye's buff being a 5-second physical art damage up in Xenoblade 1, and it's kind of weird that it just says attack up with no duration here, so either this is something you have to actually experiment with yourself to find out, which I really don't like the idea of, or it's some sort of thing where it will exclusively buff the next art you use, as opposed to being anything on a duration whatsoever. 5 arts per weapon type instead of 4 like in Xenoblade 2 just sort of seems like a natural evolution, and because of the way talent art gauge is different in this game, which I'll talk about in a minute, the actual choice between which arts to keep and which 2 to ditch is a lot more involved, because one art might have a powerful effect, but also nerf your talent gauge gain, so you sort of have to weigh your arts against your other arts and against your talent art when choosing which one to take, as well as just general battle-specific things, so I like this whole interplay of all the different systems a lot. Speaking of other systems, powerful technique, talent arts. Each class has special arts, parentheses talent arts, that can attack more powerfully than normal arts. The gauge of talent arts is accumulated by doing the action that suits your role. The rough conditions for each role are as follows. Attacker, successful attack on the side or back of the enemy. Defender, take actions to prevent enemy attacks such as guarding and avoiding. And healer, take actions to support allies such as recovery and rescue. By using the arts effectively and turning around according to your role, you will be able to use more powerful techniques. I was right about another thing, let's go! So, DPS talent gauge gain comes from hitting your positionals properly. Tank talent gauge gain comes from, it looks like, taking enemy attacks and mitigating them with your abilities, or by dodging enemy attacks. So, I was concerned that if it was just based on taking enemy attacks, Mio's class would be weird and have really nerfed talent gauge gain, but it looks like they just rolled in both face tanks and dodge tanks into the same thing, which makes a lot of sense. I'm kind of stupid for not thinking of it myself. And then for healer, it's a bit more vague because it just says do support things, and obviously healing is included in that, but we haven't really seen a lot of support arts on any healer class, besides just this is a field that if you stand in, good things will happen to you, and we have seen Uni's talent gauge tick up in very small increments very rapidly in a couple clips before, so it seems like one of the conditions for a healer talent gauge gain is just your party members standing in a field you put down for a certain period of time, which makes a lot of sense. You could put down a buffing field that does not involve healing, so healers can gain talent gauge even in a situation where you're doing so well that you're not taking damage in the first place. It then goes on to give the exact same descriptions using the exact same video clips for the Sword Fighter and Zephyr talent arts that we've seen before. So, Overclock Buster hits the enemy with a powerful blow, especially when the enemy is stunned, it can do a lot of damage, so the point is to collaborate with friends who have stun attack arts. It's got a daze boost! Gemini Strike is a powerful attack that gathers the enemy's attention while avoiding the enemy's attack. With this technique, you can attract the attention of the enemy at once and protect your friends. We literally talked about this earlier in the video. And then we have introducing a class of 6 people. Introducing the classes of the 6 main characters together. And it then sort of explains the original starting classes of all 6 of the main party members. We got a picture of Riku and Manana that stated the name of their Yumsmith class a couple weeks ago, and this is basically that same type of image, but for the main 6. So we have a picture of their name, their role icon, and then the name of their class with an icon for it. So, like how each weapon type in Xenoblade 2 had a different icon, and how each class in Xenoblade X had one, although those were a lot more abstract, it looks like in whatever the class change system is going to be, you're going to be able to determine which class is which based on these little icons as well as their names. Each of these images has a caption that Google translated to character's name, early class, and people were freaking out about this, thinking that, oh, it's their early class. Each character is going to get a unique other class later on that can probably also be passed to other party members. So people are thinking that, oh, this could be a Fire Emblem style promotion type thing. However, a more accurate translation is starting class. This is just saying that these are the base classes of all of these characters, which is something we knew about already. So, yeah, there's a lot less to be freaking out about here. Of course, we still have Noah doing funky things with the Monado having a hidden Monado from the second trailer, which seems to be a new weapon type that he has access to. And since Shulk and Rex both got special protagonist privilege super modes, I'm guessing that Noah will have a him exclusive upgraded version of Sword Fighter that is whatever that is anyway, and since Mio is allegedly the second protagonist of the game, she'll probably get an upgraded ability too, but other than that, it looks like we're just doing straight X-style class changes instead of class promotions, and that is actually a terrible analogy because X also used a class promotion tree. It's Bravely Default / old Final Fantasy games. As for the class descriptions, Sword Fighter has balanced abilities, especially good at fighting bosses and powerful unique monsters. This is interesting because we have not seen anything to indicate passive traits, and all of Noah's arts we have seen the descriptions of, and none of them mention bosses or unique monsters. So it seems like class traits will be a thing in this game, and the ones Sword Fighter has access to will do increased damage or increased crit rate or something that gives them extra effects against powerful enemies. So it looks like Noah is just the boss slayer. Then is Senna's class, Crusher. Crush your enemies with a super heavy hammer. It is a power type with a heavy blow, but there are also arts that can invalidate the enemy's guard. Be careful as it is easy to be targeted by enemies due to its high attack power. So it looks like, in a general setting, Senna's class is actually higher DPS than Noah's, but also generates more aggro, and since it doesn't have access to Shadow Eye, it looks like it's harder to mitigate that aggro, so tanks need to be more on their guard there. There's also the fact that it has guard annulling arts, which are a very classic Xenoblade 2 thing, so that's not a surprise either. Moving on to tanks, we have Mio's Zephyr. Play with enemies with quick movements, avoid attacks, and shoot powerful counters with the Twin Ring weapon. It can also prevent nearby allies from being attacked and nullify them. It's interesting mentioning being able to protect nearby allies here, because we've seen the whole tank aura thing that all tanks have, which is a ring that seems to give some protective buff to non-tank allies that stand in it. So it being singled out here and not mentioned just as a tank thing in general is interesting, and it's likely that Mio has some sort of passive ability or art we have not yet seen that does something like that to an even greater degree. The fact that it mentions shooting powerful counters is interesting. The class is called Zephyr, so it has a wind theme, which having wind projectiles would not be a big stretch to assume. So she might also have passives that cause her to do some sort of wind-based auto-attack counter-attack whenever she avoids something, just based on her pure stats and not one of her evasion arts. Moving on to Lanz's class, Heavy Guard. While protecting allies with huge weapons like shields, he specializes in arts that attract enemies. With plenty of ways to attract enemies, it's a powerful shield for your party. Not really much to say here. His talent art is literally Mad Taunt, and it looks like he has a lot of different aggro up arts, so it seems like Lanz is the purer tank of the two tanks we've seen a lot of information about so far, in that he has a lot more aggro management abilities and is built around just taking damage, as opposed to Mio, who it sort of seems like you can play as blue DPS if you really wanted to. Moving on to the healers is Yunie's class, Medic Gunner. It has arts that develop a circular field, apply extensive recovery, and strengthen allies who have entered it. Be aware that if you recover too much, you will be targeted by the enemy. This is just saying, healing aggro is a thing in this game again. Don't overheal or enemies will attack you. And last but not least is Taiyon's class, Tactician. Dazzling the enemy with a technique, he is good at supporting allies and disturbing the enemy. While putting the enemy to sleep, reduce the damage with arts that make it easier for allies to avoid. This is more or less just like, Yahoo! The arts that we've seen in that one screenshot I talked about before are sure used by this class. Not a lot to be said here, but it does again seem like Taiyon is the more support and mitigation based healing class while Yunie is pure healing. And then sad days are upon us. Depending on whether you are in Keves or Agnes, the conditions for accumulating arts gauges will change. In the Keves class, Sword Fighter, Heavy Guard, Medic Gunner, the gauge accumulates over time. And in the Agnes class, Zephyr, Crusher, Tactician, an auto attack hit, the gauge will collect. We could tell this just by looking, but this is explicit confirmation. Keves arts charge over time, and Agnes arts charge via auto attack, and that's kind of unfortunate. There's not really much else to say about this, unfortunately. Like, yeah, you get some more elite monster battle theme, and in the first clip, Riku and Manana are the hero in the party, where the party is level 40 and 41, with the hero 37, and in the second Senna clip, everyone is 22, including Valdi, who is in the hero slot. Everyone's arts are ones that we've seen before, so there's not a lot that can be said about that. I guess in the first clip, Riku and Manana are much further apart than we've seen them before, so it seems like some of their animations will have them split up a lot or something, which is kind of interesting, if only because I have no idea how standing in different puddles will work. Manana is clearly not standing in one, and yet they have a buff on them, so it looks like Riku counts as the party lead, even though it seems Manana is doing a melee attack there, so I'm gonna say I don't really know what's going on with this at all. I still dislike the fact that waiting is a mechanic in this game, but I guess I'll just put everyone on an Agnes class and choose the shortest Keves arts because that's going to be one of the few ways to make it fun for me. Next up, master the class even more. Class change. As I mentioned earlier, each class has its own characteristics, but the 6 Noahs, back again, love to see it, can freely change to the other 5 classes. For example, if you change from Sword Fighter to Zephyr, you can change your role from attacker to defense. Master arts. If you use a class for a long time and master it, you can use specific arts even if you change to another class. This is called Master Arts. For example, if Noah uses Taiyon's Tactician, he will be able to use his tactical skills even if he returns to the original Sword Fighter. And then there's another menu screenshot, so get ready to sit down for another half hour. This one seems to be a higher level or further in story progress Noah, as in addition to the 3 right-hand side art slots, he now has the top 2 left side art slots, and there are a few things that can be seen here. The art he has on D-pad up currently is Dark Shroud, and on D-pad right is Wide Slash, which is, I believe, an art from Mio. On the right side, things get even more interesting. He has Ground Beat, Sword Strike, and Thrust Edge as his 3 main Sword Fighter arts, which makes sense, we've seen them before, but then his talent art is not Overclock Buster. It is Infinity Blade. I believe we have seen this on Senna before, so apparently mixing and matching talent arts is a thing you can do, and not only does Sword Fighter have multiple talent arts, but apparently you can give this talent art to someone with a different main class as well. So there is a lot of talent art wackiness that we know exactly nothing about, and you know, I'm kind of happy about that. The list of diamond arts he can choose from are Giant Swing, which we know as a fact comes from Senna's class, Dark Shroud, which is highlighted and gets a description, and Wide Slash, which I again think is coming from Mio, so he has 3 different arts available to him, and they're all from different classes. You have to use left side arts that are the opposite shape of the ones on the right side, but you can mix and match among any classes you have unlocked Master Arts for, and I think that is really cool and opens up a lot more customization than I was initially expecting. As for the information about Dark Shroud, it comes from Tactician. It is an ether attack with the range of area in front of the user, probably a circle or fan shape, a damage ratio of 110%, gauge recovery of 8 hits from auto attacks, it inflicts sleep, and has no reaction. This is the Taiyon sleep move we've seen before. Not a lot interesting about that other than the fact that it's on Noah alongside an ability from Mio, which is just super cool in general. So I'm really happy about this art mixing thing, especially because next up we learn about fusion arts. Before we get to that though, two more things. The first is there is no mention of rank in the description for Dark Shroud, which backs up my theory that rank is not the art's level, but the class rank at which you unlock the art, because there's no mention of the level Dark Shroud is at here at all. The second is that you cannot unlock the D-pad down art until level 40. However, we do see the fusion art clip later, and everyone is in their 20s, but we finally have the first confirmation of a D-pad down art being accessible, which means either dev footage shenanigans or leveling down is back in this game, which I'm very happy about. As for fusion arts, by fusing the master arts and the arts of the current class, you can also activate the two effects at the same time. This is called fusion arts. Fusion arts are a convenient technique that allows you to use two arts at the same time. By using various classes for a long time, the range of attacks will expand. This seems to hint that you can gain more than one master art per class by ranking up in that class more, and it seems like you unlock classes or class features by deepening your bonds with your other party members. So it seems like affinity unlocks classes, class ranks unlock master arts, and you can mix and match all of your master arts together to make a really broken build, which I think is going to be very funny, because I certainly bet the week 1 meme strats are going to be amazing. The video clip that went with this is the one I was talking about before, where the party was only level 22, but Noah had the D-pad down slot unlocked, which the previous menu said was unlocked at level 40, so that's very interesting. What's also interesting is the fact that the party is holding their own against 2 level 36 enemies, despite only being level 22, except for Riku and Manana, who are 21. So this definitely points to Xenoblade 2/DE style leveling down being a thing, where your base stats will still decrease when you level down, but any cool bonuses you have on your gear or art upgrades that you wouldn't ordinarily have at that level will still be in play, so it is actually possible to do cool low-level runs of things and take on enemies that even aren't the over-level cap super bosses that are a lot higher level than you. This also means, I guess, explicit confirmation that the Xenoblade 1 mechanic of trying to penalize you more for being underleveled is still gone, which, I mean, yes, I'm ragging on the circle arts and a few Xenoblade 1 mechanics that I don't like that they're kind of potentially returning here, but I know Monolith was smart enough to not bring that back because it's been gone since X. That was never really a concern. As for Noah's arts, while the left side is interesting, the right has no surprises whatsoever. X button, air slash, Y button, sword strike, B button, thrust edge, talent art, overclock buster, moving on. D-pad up, wasp. Machine translation also sometimes said rasp or sparrow, so I don't know exactly what it's talking about, but the description is recovery around attack. So this seems to be something sort of similar to a few bitball abilities from Xenoblade 2, where it does an attack on one enemy and then heals the HP of allies that are nearby the enemy who was hit. I have no idea what class this could come from. It seems sort of Taiyon-y, but we haven't seen it on his class before. All that we know is it's from Agnes and probably some healer class, but the fact that the D-pad down being unlocked means the party has reached level 40 at some point means they've done more story progression than almost every clip we've seen before, which means they probably have access to more master arts, more classes, and more heroes than we could even imagine, so there are a lot of places that art could come from. D-pad right is reverse wandering. We have seen this art before in at least one other piece of media. It inflicts ether defense down, and I don't remember anything else about that. I don't even remember what my guesses for which class it came from were. D-pad down is remain force, pursuit of field arts, or field arts pursuit. It is a field, but I don't know what arts pursuit means. My guess would be it is a field that increases the speed at which your arts cool down. So that's probably either from, again, my brain thinks Taiyon there, but that could also easily be a DPS class ability, where you put this down, and while it's down, your other two arts go faster, and I guess you could recharge left side arts or something too, so don't really know about that, don't know what class this is from, can't even reasonably guess what role it's from, so that just makes things more interesting, because that just means there is so much about the battle system we have not seen yet. Next up, 4 points to advance the battle in an advantageous way. Finally, I would like to introduce 4 points to win the battle. Switch target. If there are 2 or more enemies during the battle, it is recommended to switch targets and destroy them one by one. This is a repeat of a tweet that was posted a few weeks ago, nothing interesting there. Collaboration with your friends, combo. This is just talking about Break Topple Days, it is again a repeat of a previous tweet. And then, cancel attack. They're finally talking about it, and the person doing gameplay on these finally learned how to cancel things, which is even nicer. Also, this is actually new information. When the attack hits, if you make the next attack at the right time, you can cancel the previous action and make a smooth continuous attack. This is called a cancel attack, and the operating character is wrapped in a circle of light. The chain attack gauge, which I will introduce next, may also be easy to accumulate, so let's aggressively aim for a cancel attack. Okay, while it doesn't explicitly say that more damage will be dealt when you cancel attacks, it does imply that doing that gets you through animations faster, and since we've seen a lot of long animations in this game, that is a good thing, and that it increases chain attack gain. So it seems like the chain attack gauge will accumulate in the ways it has in previous games in the series, but canceling abilities specifically is a way to increase it further. Senna's arts in this clip are the same ones we've seen her with pretty much every other place before, so there's not a lot interesting there. However, we do see something that I had no idea about before. And that is that, yeah, she does one auto attack cancel into an art, and that's no big deal. But then she cancels an auto into an art into her talent art, showing that that mechanic is back from Xenoblade 2. I was slightly concerned that wouldn't be a thing, but this also brings up the possibility that you will be able to cancel arts into each other. If there is a thing set up for you to be able to cancel arts into something else, then arts into arts is a thing that could be implemented, be it from a class trait, from a level up trait, from having to unlock it as part of the story, or a side quest, which I think would be a very bad idea. It is possible that that could be a thing that comes back, which is very nice because that's a way to make things faster, and faster, more engaging combat is usually good. Yay. Last thing about this clip is that the battle theme playing is what I always assumed was the regular standard battle theme, despite the party fighting an elite enemy, and most other clips of the party fighting elite enemies having a different battle theme altogether. It's possible that this was all just a coincidence, and it's going to be more of a Xenoblade 1 and 2 style thing, where different areas will have different regular battle themes, as this is an Aegis Wilderness elite monster, and most of the other elite fights we've seen were in places like Great Kate Falls or Mac the Wildwood. Final segment of the blog post, Chain Attack. If you connect combos or act according to your role, the gauge will accumulate and you can perform a powerful special move, Chain Attack, in cooperation with party members. The chain attack is powerful anyway, so let's use it hard. The only screenshots from this are ones from the second trailer where it was first shown off, and they refuse to actually explain it, so that's nice. I'm guessing Heroes, Chain Attack, and whatever switching in Ouroboros combat is like, is going to be explained either after a next trailer, in a slightly longer direct segment, or in blog post number 5, so yeah, that's all we got for now. Though we are nearly an hour into the video, I can rejoice. For mercifully, no new information besides what was present in the blog post was revealed after recording all of that previous info, which means we can directly jump into the potential spoiler section. So do not continue listening to or watching this video if you do not want potential spoilers for the game, as there are some fairly wide-reaching consequences. I am going to talk about the slightly easier to spot one first because it's also probably less of a spoiler if it turns out to actually be one. Each of the Xenoblade 3 blog posts has a banner, and there are 2 different versions of that. There's the one on the Xenoblade 3 website that links to the actual article, and then the banner on top of each article itself. On the Monolith website version only of the Volume 4 banner, we can see a new hero character. Each blog post has a different piece of character art in the banner. Volume 1 had Ethel, 2 Noah, 3 Mio, and now 4 has Taiyon. In the article version of the banner, we can see the party fighting in Ardun in Millick Meadows. The bodies for all 6 main party members, with the exception of Lanz, are visible here, yet there is a weapon poking up behind Taiyon's right elbow. If we switch to the website version of the banner, however, the cropping is different and Taiyon's art is completely resized and repositioned, so we can in fact see that this is not Lanz using a weapon type we've not seen yet, but an entirely new character. The weapon being used is some sort of lance with the exact same golden yellow energy as a lot of Agnes things. It also has an orange banner reminiscent not only of Taiyon's scarf, but a lot of pieces of Agnes aesthetic and architecture we've seen before. And the character holding it appears to be a female purple-haired person wearing a very Agnes-looking uniform. There is a circle visible near the head of the lance, which suggests this is a blade weapon, and this character is a tattooed Agnes soldier who joined the party as a hero for some unknown reason. But the interesting thing is, while this is a new weapon type, because it has the banner on it, and it's a more spear-like long thing, this isn't necessarily the only time we've seen a lance in this game, as Kamaravi also wields one. I want to put the whole two-lance thing on the back burner for a minute though, and talk about the other spoiler. So remember how I pretty much completely dismissed the video clip that went with the explicit confirmation of how Circle and Diamond Arts worked? Well, it doesn't tell us anything new about Circle and Diamond Arts, but it sure is hiding one very specific secret. In the first half of the clip, the player is controlling Uni because she is using her Medic Gunner Keves class, and that obviously will have the circle arts to demonstrate how those work. At one point, it zooms in on her arts palette and blacks out almost the entire screen except the art on her X button, but you can still see a little bit of the background and the characters moving around. While Uni does have a couple master arts set, we can clearly see that everyone is in their default main class based on the weapons they're carrying. However, Senna does use a master art during the portion of the clip where it's zoomed in and blacked out. It's already evident if you go frame by frame, but I'm going to brighten up the background a little bit to show that it is very clearly dual swords, and not just any type of dual swords, one where one sword is significantly longer than the other, which you might recognize as being the same type of weapon that Ethel uses. This is extremely significant. We don't know how or why, but Ethel's class will become available to the party members, which means that we will be able to control people who are using it. The first thing you're gonna jump to is, of course, oh, Ethel's going to join the party as a hero, but that is not necessarily the case. We know that the main characters can get new classes from the hero system, but nowhere was it said that is the only way to get them. It is very possible we're going to have a Bravely Default type thing, where after defeating significant enemies or bosses that use blade type weapons, the party will be able to use that for themselves. We also know that the method of switching arts and classes and stuff and getting access to things that more people have is by deepening bonds with them, and we know as a fact that Noah looks up to Ethel a lot, and the entire Keves party has a deep-seated, long-lasting attachment to her, so she doesn't necessarily need to join the party for that sort of connection to exist to allow her class to be accessible by party members. Then, we also have to look at the pink-haired lance person, as this character is clearly in the hero slot aiding the party, and as such will be able to give that class to the other party members, but the weapon they're using, while not identical, is extremely similar to Kamaravi's. Then there's also the fact that Taiyon was very specifically an apprentice to Iserd, and while the weapon we see Iserd using in the trailer is significantly different from Taiyon's Katashiro, it still does take the form of a gauntlet thing. So it's possible that, yes, the leaders of all these colonies are still just straight up going to be antagonists that we will have to deal with at some point during the story, but one of their apprentices, or people trained by them, or people who want to fight like them, will join the party as heroes, and that's how we will gain access to their classes. There is the possibility that we're going to steal classes from bosses. There is the possibility that the colony leaders are going to become heroes later on in the story when the real enemy is shown and the Agnes Keves war is stopped. But I also think that we are not necessarily going to get the actual characters who originated these classes, but sort of a second-hand version of them from people they have trained. So, while I know a lot of people are already jumping on the Ethel for party member train, that doesn't have to be the case. It's very easy for there to be some retconned other character Ethel saved the same time she saved the party that she actively took under her wing and trained using her same weapon type, and that person is going to join the party because they also just kind of happen to be friends with Noah and realize that he wouldn't betray Keves unless he had a very good reason. Hey, guess what? I'm replacing the original end of this video with one more thing because I found another thing that might be a spoiler. Remember that clip I keep talking about where Senna uses her talent art? In the background, while that animation is playing, you can see that there's this big line of energy that rushes across the screen through the enemy. And if you slow the clip down again and pay attention to when the camera angle changes, we can see that this line of energy actually emanates from Noah, who is doing a very interesting stance. His weapon is not in his hand, and when he stances back up, he's in like an Iaijutsu weapon drawing stance, and when he does so, his regular sword fighter red blade shows up. I think, now keyword think, nothing in this is for certain, that before he stances up and resummons the blade, there is still something in his right hand, and the only thing I could think of that could fit that bill would be the metal smaller sword Minato has a hidden Minato thing from the second trailer. I mentioned earlier in this very video that I still think that is some sort of upgraded ability that Noah only will have access to because Xenoblade protagonist privilege, so that might be what we're seeing here. And while this is likely some form of talent art just because of how flashy it is, it would probably be a Noah exclusive talent art if that was in fact the case. It could just be some other talent art, but the fact that his weapon vanishes and he does something that very much resembles a sword slash type attack suggests that this is somehow connected to the sword fighter class. It could be a secondary talent art that is not Overclock Buster and we haven't seen in action, maybe Infinity Blade, and that has the animation effect of just destroying the weapon in the attack and then the character resummons it, and everyone can do that, but I'm not entirely sure. I'm throwing this in the spoiler section because I don't actually know what this necessarily means. If Noah's special thing does have a gameplay thing, that's probably a big deal, especially because the characters are fairly low level when this happens, so this would be a lower level thing than Minato 2, and about on par with Mithra coming out, so that's very interesting. And there's also the fact that he doesn't have the Iron Man gauntlet formed from the sword when he does this, so it's possible that the inner sword thing is something everyone can do for a talent art, but the gauntlet thing and whatever powers come with that are a Noah exclusive thing, and only some parts of the Minato having a hidden Minato are actually exclusive to Noah. However, that's all I've got. This video is already 2 days late, and several other important bits of information about characters, including a 1-minute environment trailer, have already dropped as I'm recording this, and this is just the last week video, so I'm not going to say anything big for an outro. You know you're going to expect another thing next week, hopefully on time this time, so until then, this is Luxon, signing off.